Meghan's podcast with Serena Williams is one of the most self-serving and factually inaccurate interviews I've ever heard. I could try to word it nicely, but it wouldn't be right. So stick around for the next few minutes to see why I came to that conclusion. And don't forget to write your opinion about this podcast. If you like the video, click the like button. And if you're interested in how language works and what it says about people, subscribe to the channel. It's become quite a trend for opportunistic people to point fingers at society and companies for their own misfortunes and struggles. Resistance is a factor for everyone who tries to achieve success, however you define success. Unfortunately, companies and universities have long since surrendered to this victim mentality. This kind of so-called activism has no real end goal. Instead, it's a deceptive, deliberately self-contradictory maneuver of claiming that other people have privilege, while at the same time demanding privilege, and claiming there's division, while at the same time creating division. The victim mindset underlays all of Meghan's conclusions in this podcast, which ironically is about being strong and brave. Meghan says her podcast is about the labels and tropes that try to hold women back, and about ripping apart the boxes women have been placed into, boxes like diva and crazy. In the first sentence, the grammatical subject is labels and tropes, ascribing agency to them. And in the second sentence, the collective noun, women, is used in a passive voice construction, boxes women have been placed into. Both kinds of syntaxes free women of responsibility and place them in a vulnerable position as victims. We should note the verb try. Labels and tropes can't try anything, as they don't have a will. People have will, so this is an intentionally indirect personification of an undefined group of people that allegedly uses these labels and tropes. And lastly, the adjective crazy isn't exclusive to women, but has universal application. So already, Meghan paints with a very broad brush, and logically, way too broad. So it's a good thing that this podcast isn't about logic, but about feelings, so that Meghan won't be held accountable for any claim she's making. Meghan says she wants to get to the bottom of where these labels come from, and how we can move past them. This associating collective pronoun makes it sound like a general problem for women. However, when people speak long enough, they always tell on themselves. And in the very next passage, Meghan changes the pronoun we to I, indicating that her intention is actually to justify her actions and hence clear her name. She dedicates 2 sentences to herself. She says, of course, I know a thing or two about those labels myself, and my hope is that my own lived experience will help other women open up. Before she goes back to the collective us, every pronoun shift is significant and is the result of the subject's thought process, what's on their mind at any given moment. Meghan generalizes her own alleged struggles and feelings to all women, which is psychological projection. Also, we notice grandiose word choice, as I call it. I've detailed the concept in this video. Grandiose language is characterized by self-important, vague and unspecific words like these, to reveal the layers that thrive within all of us, and the future is something we get to write together. Language like this is right out of the handbook of someone running for office, and it's something to be aware of, because there are always unsaid presuppositions behind it. It's a covert way of communicating, which is why politicians prefer it. It's a way to utilize easy catchphrases without defining anything or actually arguing for stated positions. Meghan continues with the presuppositions designed to play on her audience's emotions. This time it's the word ambition, which she claims is a dirty, dirty word when it comes to women. This is a rather extreme generalization, which she has yet to prove with non-anecdotal evidence. At one point in the conversation, they talk about an article about how girls tend to raise the hand less and less as time goes on, but there's no talk about the validity of the article. Instead, it's a claim that they use to support another claim, the claim they started with, that women are supposedly criticized for being ambitious. This is circularity, presupposing the very thing they should be attempting to prove. Also, it's category error. Suppose that girls do raise their hand less and less. This has no necessary connection to the labels and tropes that Meghan mentioned in the beginning. And the word necessary is key here, because they talk in terms of causality, not simply correlation. Science is rarely entirely unbiased. Thus, there's an important distinction between causation and correlation. When Meghan's interviewed by New York Times, we don't get any critical thought either. The interviewer, Andrew, shows no discernment of the words he uses and the connections he makes.
You used the word ambition just now.
Oh, it's a trigger word.
Well, no, but it's a word that a lot of people have used to demonize women oftentimes.
Yes.
When the word ambition and women are put together, and you've been on the other end of that.
In order for an argument to actually be an argument, there needs to be a claim, grounds for the claim, and a warrant, which is how a person gets from the grounds to the claim. The warrant is the premise you have to agree with in order to believe the claim. Here, the claim is that a lot of people have oftentimes used the word ambition to demonize women. A lot of people is unspecific. The adverb oftentimes is equally unspecific and functions as a weak qualifier to the claim. He provides no grounds for this claim. Instead, he points to Meghan's experience for so-called backing. However, since it's anecdotal evidence, it's not only weak, but also vague, and logically, the claim doesn't justify the grammatical subject, a lot of people. This is circular reasoning, assuming what it should be attempting to prove.
And you've been on the other end of that. Both of you have.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Melody, we've talked about this before. It's a really interesting one. You think, why is it culturally we are equipping girls and women to think that if you are ambitious, there's something negative about that, whereas if a boy is described that way, or if a man certainly is described as ambitious, that's an incredibly positive thing culturally. But I don't know how we end up changing that.
Allegedly, this is Meghan's opinion. But she doesn't talk like this is just her opinion. She appeals to alleged universal problems, and she presupposes a lot in her statements. Next, we learn what all this talk about ambition and changing things for the greater good is really about. Redeeming Meghan in the eyes of the world, or whoever's listening. Because she says she's never personally felt the negative connotations behind the word ambitious until she started dating her now husband. This is an implicit reference to a disastrous Oprah interview. In this interview, it was more than implied that Harry decided to leave the UK with Meghan because she told him that she feared for her mental health. She then says that apparently ambition is a terrible, terrible thing, for a woman that is, according to some. Not once has Meghan been criticized for her ambition, but this is what she's trying to make it seem like, and she says this while still making it sound like she speaks generally. Because first she calls herself a woman, as if she's one of many in this type of situation, and secondly, she goes on to claim that millions of girls and women make themselves smaller on a regular basis. Again, this is projection, generalizing her personal feelings. This attempt to ingratiate herself with other women ends up sounding like one big self-serving attempt to present herself in the best light possible under the guise of wanting change for everyone. Lastly, it's worth considering the word ambitious when placed in the context of her dating Harry. Could this be an actual admission that she had ambitions with the dating? Ambitions that had very little to do with love and very much to do with advancement and being given a platform. At least, it's interesting that this connection between ambition and dating and eventually marriage is on her mind. Meghan's association continues with the generalizing pronoun you. When you're young, you're also so fearless. And I don't think we're as fearless as we were then, referring to her teenage years. Again, this is Meghan projecting her personal opinions and feelings onto other people to make it seem like she's not alone in the world. These projections express the opposite of the strong and brave image she wishes to have. And again, notice the constant victim role. She's not as fearless anymore because of something she's doing wrong, but because of these archetypes, because of what society is doing, because of the pressure of the media, because of all this noise. That's 4 causations in a row, starting with because, and yet she hasn't established any of these, archetypes, society, media, noise, to be the cause of anything. She's deceptively avoiding actual arguments by making presuppositions. Furthermore, what she claims is factually untrue. There's never been so much focus on women as in today's society, from the media's focus on issues like body positivity to a university's focus on quotas and programs specifically designed for women and not allowed for men. When Oprah briefly confronted Meghan with people's negative opinions about her, that she married Harry to build her brand, Meghan also went into defense mode by portraying herself as a victim, how she was overlooked, even though the things she mentions are minuscule compared to what other people are going through. She says there was no guidance or training, nothing that was offered to her, unlike what you see in movies, as she says, which suggests unrealistic expectations on her part. She makes an easy challenge sound like a big problem when she says that no one thought to say, "You're American, you're not going to know the national anthem." She claims that she sat late at night and Googled the national anthem. Meghan finishes with more self-serving statements. Under the guise of talking about Serena, she's referring to herself. She says that she and Serena spoke about the misconception that if you're an ambitious woman who you have an agenda, you must be calculating, or you're selfish and aggressive, or a climber. These so-called misconceptions are specific to Meghan and what she's been called: calculating, selfish, a climber, and she's now trying to project them onto other women. As expected, she then praises herself, that if you're that fierce or strong or brave, then you somehow deserve whatever gets thrown at you, followed by, even when it's more than most could endure, most men, most anyone. However, as we've seen in this analysis, Meghan actually lacks the qualities, strength and bravery, as she's making herself seem weak and helpless, whenever she can use the victim role to get what she wants. Meghan closes with words that are presumably about Serena, but are actually about her. She's going to continue to do great things, to be ambitious, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Meghan's trying to persuade her audience here, trying to make them think of her as merely ambitious, and that this ambition is what's made people dislike her. This is linguistic manipulation, but Meghan, who has very little self-awareness, probably thinks her persuasion's going great. The statement, "I think that's a beautiful thing," is one last pat on the back. In conclusion, this podcast is a way for Meghan to try to clear her name under the guise of fighting for a bigger cause. As expected, the bigger cause, whatever it is unspecific and vague. On a larger scale, however, I think there's a lesson to be learned here. Whenever people with huge platforms and power and influence use grandiose language, words that appeal to our emotions and thus make us feel good, we should be highly skeptical. Very often, these people use association and feel-good visions for the future, for self-interest, to enhance their personal goals. And these personal goals are more often than not about power and money. What sounds good in the moment can turn out to be very bad in the long run. Let me know what you think about this podcast. Subscribe to the channel for more videos.